Hello, my name is Emily and I'm here with Yesterday's Stash. Today I want to show you a book that I have been working on. It's a Jane Austen themed journal. I'm a Jane Austen fan, I'm an Anglophile, whatever. So I've been making a lot of Jane Austen books, but this is what it looks like, 6x9, and it's just got a pretty wide, like 4.5 inches spine, and this is what the fabric looks like on the other side. I have it tied here with a fairly thick trim, so it will hold it together. But anyway, the book is a Jane Austen theme, and she's a very interesting character. Has a lot of things to put in a book about her. This is your identification card that lets you know that the book belongs to you. And I'm just going to go through the pages. This is a quote by her. This is a trim that I used on this page, and I have several charms in the book. This is some stamps that England used at special occasions where with her life. This year they're celebrating 250 years since she was born. This is a little bit of information about her. And I have this particular chair here because one of the things I want to focus on is the amount of needlework that she did along with her sister and her mother. But they used to also use the needlework for putting the upholstering their chairs. So that's just something that they did. She was a pianist. She played the piano, so music was a part of her life. She talked about in the evening people playing piano music for their guests in some of her books or other musical instruments. So there were two brothers, the Brock brothers is what they called, in the late, let's see, she died in 1814, 16, she died in 1817, but it wasn't until the late 1800s that publishers started putting illustrations in their books. So this was about 50 years after she passed away, but the Brock brothers did a lot of the illustrations, other illustrators as well, but the Brock brothers are who we recognize the most as doing these illustrations. So we have lots of over 70 pages where you can do notes or keep lists or write journals. However, blank pages are there for use. She did handwrite a story about the history of England. This is her handwriting, and it was published just like that. And it's fairly interesting, consistent handwriting, so I thought it would be interesting to have some of the pages of hers there. Mansfield Park being one of the books that she wrote, and her house is a few pages away, but this is some ledger paper for note-taking. This is several different things on music that would have to do with her being a pianist. This is an example of some of the handwork or needlework that they would do. This particular one might go on a hand towel, but there were others that could go on pillows, that could go on clothing. So they did a lot of that handwork back in that time, which is still something that we do today. I'm going to have a board that you put on the back for these blank pages so that you don't have to worry about it being bumpy from the other side. Here's an example of a picture of a woman doing her needlework. And here's an example of two sisters, or two people, working on a dress together. And when I say sister, her sister Cassandra, who was like a couple of years older than her, they ended up becoming best friends and staying together and living together. In fact, Jane died in Cassandra's arms. So sisterhood is one of the other really neat themes about Jane Austen. Publishers over the years have, different publishers have taken the titles of the books and designed illustrations on the front. This is an example of Persuasion, one of her books that was that had that type of figure on the outside. This is another CE or HM Brock, whichever. That's a CE Brock. This is when I said Jane Austen's house back here. This is an example of what the house looked like. It's the last house that she lived in, and I think she lived here for maybe, I can't remember, it was 7 years or 10 years, but this house belonged to her her brother, one of her brothers, who had inherited a huge estate, and this house was on the estate. So he had his two sisters, Cassandra and Jane, plus Mrs. Austen, came and lived here after they left Bath, and Bath is where Mr. Austen passed away. Lots of quotes in here. Jane had lots of quotes. I follow a lot of the junk journal folks on YouTube and get a lot of ideas from them. This is where one of the titles of the book, Mansfield Park, is stamped onto a piece of fabric. I have a place called Spoonflower that's not too far from me that does specific fabric designs that you submit to them, and then they sell the designs. And so this is one of them. Back in those days, women had to change their name from a female to a male, because if they wanted to publish a book, because in those days it was not considered something that publishers did, was to publish women's books. This is a Monet print that the colors go so well with the rest of the colors in this book. And then the author, in the novels, they will have illustrations in here that were by the same people that typically put pictures of the books, and but they're used taking scenes from the story and putting them in there. This is an interesting idea that I found from an Etsy seller, where you can kind of make a tag, but inside the cellophane you put fabric and an interesting lace design or something, and you can use it as a tag, or you can frame it, or however you care to use it for. There's lots of quotes throughout all of the 6 books. The 6 books are the ones that I mainly talk about, but after her death, they found other books that she had either started or had finished. And so even though 4 books were published at her time of her life, there were others after that as well. This is where I take upholstery and then I add a lace panel to it and turn it into a pocket. And the same thing here, taking a coloration and joining together all of the different trims and laces and wide lace, narrow lace, the scrapbook papers, and making a page from all of those and putting a pocket on it, and then adding some tags. This is Chatsworth House, which is a real house in England, and they used this as Mr. Darcy's house, or Pemberley Place, in Pride and Prejudice. Here's another edition of Mansfield Park, this picture being very different than the one I showed you previously, depending on the publishers and what they wanted. to have on the picture. I guess updating the book with a new picture on the front, you know, was I guess good for sales. And here's an example of postcards that you can get from a place called Alibaba, I think. And you just order them based on what you want. Oh no, this is Zazzle. And you order it from Zazzle, and the postcards come, and they have like a list of different designs that you can choose from, which I think are pretty interesting. So throughout the book, I do have pictures of two sisters doing things together to correspond with the theme of her having Cassandra. Both of them got offers for marriage, but neither one of them ended up getting marriage. For Cassandra, her fiance, she was engaged, but he died in the war. And Jane got a proposal, but decided she had to marry for love, so she did not accept she accepted the proposal and then turned it down. Here's Pride and Prejudice. This is an example of what a publisher would put on the front cover of a Pride and Prejudice book. This is a belly band, and it's got a map of England. And this is like where I've taken several different colors of fabric and joined them together kind of in a zigzag pattern. This is a handmade tag, Write Your Story, that I made. I love to make handmade tags. Continuing with charms on just about every few pages. Here is tea, because in England, of course, you stop for tea, and England seems to be the place where that is still very fashionable. This is an example of what a Regency house looked like. Jane lived in different periods, several different periods of England's history, but during the Regency period, a lot of changes took place in England. Just people that were doing things one way started doing them another, and it became the latest fashion. And this is what a Regency house would look like. And I have other pictures to show. Here's an example. It would have a front door, and then the same thing that's on the left side of the door would be on the right side of the door. And it would have more than one floor. Of course, we associate Jane Austen with reading and writing, but again, there's many other aspects of her life that were interesting. So this is a circle, and then I put a doily around it and added added another little doily and a quote using smaller doilies as decoration. This is from an Etsy seller. It's a Jane Austen set that I've ordered the digital downloads. I don't know how to do that, so I respect the fact that other people know how to do that sort of graphic design. Here's a picture of a person who is sitting, it looks like she's sitting in her kitchen with a little kitty cat, a sewing basket, and she's knitting. This is during the war in Bath. Another picture of a similar picture. Here's an example where you can take another idea I got from is putting a paper clip on the back side and just sliding it down. Dried flowers. So just get a lot of good ideas on how to add interest to a junk journal, making it a lookbook, a decorated book, a memory book, as well as a journal for writing in, as well as lots of pockets for keeping things in. And again, here's another picture of Chatsworth. You can look that up on Google. She lived in London she stayed in London with a brother that she had for a period of time. She was trying to get her books published. She visited a lot of places and stayed with him for a while, long enough to be able to enjoy London for a period of time. And actually, there's a sign on the front of his house, and this is something that I guess London does. They put these blue signs up next to a door on the house to let you know who lived there at one time. So his house has that label on it. Handmade paper, using scrapbook paper as well as complementing laces. Here's a photo of her. And again, illustrations in the books that let us know some of the storyline. She was a hat person. She loved to wear hats, and she would make a lot of hats. She talked about going to the store and getting ribbon for a hat. And here is 3 little quotes from the letters that she wrote to Cassandra talking about hats. Not all of, but most of the quotes in here are from Jane Austen's books. So I think this is the first edition, the first published edition of Pride and Prejudice, and what it looked like on the outside. I think all of them looked very similar. I found this as a snippet roll of different neckties sewn together, and then made into like I say, a snippet roll. This particular one, I've been making them into tags, and so I cut through and made a little tag out of it. Here's just another example of how sisters enjoying each other's company, reading a letter that somebody got. Here's a digital download from one of the Etsy sellers, which I'll have a list of Etsy sellers that I've used. But these are postcards that came from a Jane Austen kit. And I put them on shiny paper, photograph paper. And then this is a heart that I made. Just a little 3D heart. It sticks there. Library cards. She did go to a library I think there were libraries back in those days. Seems like I read something about her going to a library. But her father had a huge library in his house. Again, he was a rector, so he taught. So he had lots of books. He was a reader. And these last two inserts are of 2 sisters doing a variety of things, enjoying each other's company. And this is the end. This is the last page of the book. And this has this particular it's got something on it that's making it sticky. A timeline of her life. So, just a really interesting hobby to have, making these books, especially to learn more about Jane and making a book that is like her, or that things that she did in her time. And it's just a lot of fun. This book will be for sale in my Etsy store, Yesterday's Stash. It's all one word, all lowercase. And thank you for coming along and looking through this book with me, and we'll talk again soon.